We should get started. Before we do, I'm going to introduce you formally to David Price Francis, but I want to read your bio, and that'll be part of the formal introduction. David Price Francis is a master energy counselor, a spiritual teacher, personal growth expert, and author. He helps individuals, couples, and groups understand and improve the quality of energy in their lives and relationships, enabling them to achieve greater personal and professional happiness, fulfillment, and success. David focuses on how we can integrate the energies of our mind, body, and soul and spirit to engage in a more holistic way with all facets of our life. David strives to help people gain a greater understanding of the importance of human and creation energy in our lives using techniques and strategies that he has developed and honed in his work with clients for over 35 years. David, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, glad to be here again.
Yes. Now, you wouldn't call this energy medicine, right?
I wouldn't. It has an aspect that one kind of look at energy medicine, absolutely.
Right.
I'd rather look at the idea of holistic health for humans. That's a good title.
Holistic health for humans.
Holistic health for humans.
That'll be for the next one.
New title to play. Yeah, I'd rather look at it that way.
When I talk to people about energy, it's confusing. It's confusing for me to explain it. It's confusing for people to understand it because we have physical energy, we have relationship that is spiritual, but are we talking about, or are you, when you're working with people, talking about frequency of energy or something different?
Okay. Well, let me try defining in a new way. I've been working on this in the last couple of weeks. To say that we have 5 fundamental sources of energy that we draw into ourselves, and they actually correspond with the elements. So we have earth, which is physical food, and from that physical food we combust the food and we draw energy. So we draw energy from the physical earth source.
Right.
That's the one we can do without the longest. Then we go to liquids. So every time we're taking in a glass of water, we're drinking milk, we're drinking tea, whatever it is, we're drawing energy from those liquids, again, from combustion. Then we go to gas, so air and breathing content. This is one I've been working more on in the last couple of weeks, because we also then draw in energy directly from the air. And we draw in a lot more energy, mostly than we realize. We tend to think of breathing as just breathing in and out, and that's what it is. But when we look at the history of breath work, the original idea of a qi gong, which many of your listeners may have heard of, simply meant originally breath work. So it wasn't so much to do with movements as breathing. So we draw energy from breath and we draw energy from light. So the 4 elements are earth, physical food, water, liquid food, air, gas food, and then light. We tend to underestimate the importance of light. So I want to speak a little bit about that today. The so-called sun salutation in yoga, which many people now know of, it was never a posture originally. It was going out into the sunlight. Because when we go into the sun, and there's increasing scientific research on this, there's energy traveling through the sunlight. And when it comes in through our optic nerve, comes in through our skin, then that energy then goes into our brain and actually is very important in waking us up. So one practice I've adopted recently is being sure just to sit outside for about 15 minutes in the morning to take in daylight rather than being in a room. So these are 4 crucial sources of energy. And the 5th, the one where you mentioned frequency, is what they used to call the quintessence. The 5th essence. Quint is to do with the number 5. Quintessence is the 5th power. That's what they used to call ether. It's where we get the idea of Ethernet cables and so-called etherics. It's coming out of the ether. Well, the ether is the name given to planetary energetics. So we live inside the atmosphere of the planet. We live inside planetary energy, and we bring in energy directly through our ears, through our eyes. Fascinating when we look at the gradation of the holes in our head. I do like to be really looking at the basic human design. The physical and the liquid goes in through the lowest hole in our face. The gas is primarily meant to go in through our nose, and then light and higher electrics come in through our eyes and our ears, which are the highest holes in our head. We're built that way. So the lower foods go down into our digestive organs and they get combusted. The higher foods, if we listen to a piece of music, we're listening to Four Seasons by Vivaldi, let's say, we're not eating it, we're not combusting it. We are, however, extracting energy from it, because look how people are affected by music. They're affected by the energy that lives inside the music. And say half an hour of heavy metal, half an hour of Megadeth is going to have a very different impact on our brain and our mind and our energy system than half an hour of listening to Mozart.
But Megadeth may have a type of energy that you need at a particular time, right?
It may be, it's exhaustion energy.
Yeah.
Like people will go and get rid of toxicity with that kind of music.
Yeah.
So it's one of the ways. So when people they're not enjoying their week, let's say, they're doing a job they don't enjoy, they're getting loaded up with toxic energy, going to a Megadeth concert is a way to then get rid of that. But if you're trying to live at a higher vibrational frequency, then that's not something you're going to have playing regularly in the house.
You mentioned something about, well, when you went back to talk about the light and sunlight, I read a study recently that there is some indication that we can transform, you know how plants transform sunlight, they go through photosynthesis, that we can too transform sunlight into operable energy. Have you read studies like that?
Yes. And I think we underestimate sunlight enormously, because we can't register all of the subtle energies that are inside it. We register vitamin D and we register certain effects, the most simple effects. But think about an optic fiber. Like right now, they're laying optic fibers across the Atlantic so we can have more cloud capacity. And in one tiny little optic fiber, they can send the entire Encyclopedia Britannica in about 3 seconds. Well, what's coming from the sun, intelligence travels through light. So part of the sun salutation was to get tuned in to what is the most recent, you could say, solar update. Because sunlight today is not the same as sunlight yesterday. It's going to have slightly different ingredients that we're not even aware of, but people who are natural planetary people, we're having to do things like get apps to remind us to do stuff, the kind of stuff that people used to do anyway. They'd get up in the morning, they'd go straight out into the sunlight, they'd be breathing in the fresh air. They were bringing in a concentrate of planetary energy. So what I find with sickness is that, from an energetic standpoint, is that our energy frequency drops when we get sick. So I like to talk about charging our electroimmune system. It's a term that I created for the idea that our energy field, which stretches all around us, but comes from inside us, which is, again, really important. Mostly that isn't understood. People think of the energy field as outside us, but it's born from inside our body. It comes, surges up our spine, out through the top of our head, and then you actually see the aura like and then it hangs or holds for about 7 seconds, and then it happens again. It's like our energy field is breathing.
But do we have to be plugged in? Like, do we have to, and I don't mean plug that in a,
Sure.
plug, but do we need to have that energy well up? Do we not need to have a circular motion so we're drawing, taking in, and releasing?
It naturally happens.
Naturally
It's
happens.
part of our natural design. Like if we weren't plugged into planetary energy at all, we would die, because the signal that keeps our heart beating, as an example, we don't generate that signal. I mean, a heart, you can literally take a heart outside of the human body and it still beats. It's got its own mechanism. Now, what I believe with that is that there's an energy signal inside the planet's energy field that actually resonates through our different organs. They used to call this in China qi.
Right.
I believe it's where the name of the country came from, China. So they called it qi. There's qi for the kidneys, qi for the liver, the heart, being particularly important. So there are energy signals that are automatic to our design, just like the rest of organic life. We don't have to think about our heartbeat. We don't have to think about our kidneys working. If we did, we'd be in a real mess. Be walking down the street going, "Oh, hello, so-and-so, beat. Don't forget the kidneys beat." We'd forget. We'd be over in seconds. So we've kind of got, you could think we've got our main computer, we've got the hardware, and we've got already installed some, that would be the firmware, I think it's called, but we've got already installed certain programs by which everything functions. And that's called being healthy. That's called having a healthy metabolism. And then our consciousness, the choices we make, kind of floats on top of that. That's what makes us different from dogs and cats and trees and birds. They're all in harmony with planetary energy and also the energies of astrology, like the poppies are tuned into Mars force, or a wolf is tuned into Mars force. As human beings, we can jump from one astrological sign to another by how we think, by how we feel. We can change our frequency. That's where frequency comes in, because we've been given an extra set of controls that nothing else on the planet has. Everything else is 100% being what it is. You never look at a cat and say, "Well, why don't you get a job?" You don't seem to be doing anything useful. It looks at you and it's like, "I'm being a cat. That's my job." And everything else is being what it is. Only when we come to the human is it like, and what are you doing?
And therefore, mindfulness and thoughts are interconnected with our overall energy.
Absolutely. That's like the fifth power. Yeah, and that's the one that we can change our state, I believe, the fastest. But we do need to, by using our mind, to pay attention to our nutrition, which you're well aware of and teach, and then breathing. I've been reading and researching breath quite a bit recently. So I tried a new practice of mouth taping, trying to teach myself to breathe.
James Nestor, right? Did you read his book? Excellent. I've spoken to him. He's wonderful.
I have his book right here.
Yeah, mine's in my room. It's a wonderful book, everybody. If you have not read this, I've done a podcast with James. It's a fantastic book. It really, really is. It really has people I've given it to. It's really changed their lives. The power of the breath. You said to me, I understand nutrition, this and that. David, the more I am involved in this career path of mine, the more nutrition becomes a piece of a larger circle.
Yes.
And the mindfulness aspect, the energy aspect, that really, the more I research, is really starting to pivot the way I look. And when you're talking about getting up and I do a lot of, I like the science aspect of things.
Me too.
And when you were talking about getting up and getting outside for 10 minutes, well, that's what I tell people when I ask them to get their circadian rhythm in sync, which again is plugging into your proper energies. And food and timing of eating and when you're eating in different times of the day, obviously circadian rhythm, but ultimately energy. And I think this is a piece that people really need to delve into, because the more they understand what you're saying, the more, even more control they can have over their health. And you brought up, and I think I interrupted you, the immune system.
Yes.
And this is something that's very interesting, if you could tell everybody about this.
Absolutely. I think of it as the strength in our energy field. So each of us has an energy field or aura, and it stretches out to about, I'll demonstrate it, about to the edge of our fingertips and just beyond.
So literally stretches out that far.
Yes.
Okay.
When we're healthy, when we've got a nice robust field going, and it's a complete egg. It goes above our heads all the way down and goes beneath our feet.
I think I've seen that diagram, right?
Yes, it goes right the way down into the planet. That Vitruvian Man by Leonardo.
That's it. Yeah.
So he goes all the way around us. So we're actually walking, talking, thinking, breathing eggs in a way.
Okay.
And the most dense part of our energy field is actually inside our body. And then we see the finer levels of it coming out. And what's around us changes according to what we're thinking, according to what we're feeling. So if somebody gets angry, you can literally see their field go red with rage.
Right.
That's where we get the expression. It's heard that a coward has a yellow streak. Well, yellow is the color of emotion. It's not necessarily cowardice, but what you have is when someone gets really emotional, they produce a yellow glow. And they
And
can
this is literally, right? This is measurable.
measure, you can actually see it when you've trained your eyes to look more into these energy worlds like I have. You can actually start to see these colors happen around people, which is a whole other dimension of living.
Mhm.
It's why the work I do, I called it energy worlds, because it's like stepping into another world. And you can see, you look at a flower and you can see color around the flower. There's the flower, the physical flower, and then the color around it that it's processing. So everything on the planet is processing energy, planetary energy, universal energy. The more refined we are, the more we process. So when you look at, say, a piece of plastic, like if I pick up this little remote control here, it's got hardly any energy field around it. It's got a very tiny, tiny field. It's got enough power in it. If you were to take that, what is it, energy equals mass times speed of light cube squared, it's got enough power in this thing to power a city. But that's built into its hardware. That's the atomic of it. But the actual process of energy through it is very, very minimal. And plastic has got a very, very tiny field. If you were to go to a piece of wood, here's a piece of wood, I'll take from here. This is a Chinese statue. So if you take a piece of wood, this has a much larger field around it because it's a more natural property. But it's been detached from its roots. So it's still minimal compared to a living tree.
So you're at the level where you can see colors. For us who aren't there yet, is
Yes.
it that feeling that you get when you walk into a room and the energy is high versus the energy is low, or you see somebody and you think you're drawn to them
Yes.
versus, so that's where most of us are at.
Yes, we have an instinct about it. And
Mhm.
also why it's nice to go walking in the woods. Because, like I said, this a piece of wood that it's beautifully carved, but it's been cut away from its roots. But when you go for a walk in the woods, the soul of the tree, the energy field of the tree, is still present in the tree. So when you're walking through the wood, you're actually, your energy field is being enriched by the energies that you're walking through. That's why people like to go into nature. It's a very different experience going for a walk in nature than going for a walk through an industrial estate.
Right.
Well, the industrial estate has got a lower, more red natured frequency. It's got a lower vibration. That's why you don't really want to snuggle up with your computer at night or go to sleep with the TV set on or have your cell phone under your pillow, because that is a lower energy and it actually interferes with our natural patterns. So the way I look at it is there's what's now been called subtle energy, which is energy from the universe, energy from the sun, the planet, the moon, the local planets, the stars. These are all universal creation energies. And, and then there's the energy that comes from the different kind of ways we've changed or worked with planetary energy. So to give an example, when we plug something into the wall, we're drawing electricity. If I'm plugging in my, say I've got my cell phone here and I plug it into the wall, then what happens is it gets charged up from that electricity. But here's the question, where does electricity come from? And there's an, I know it's an apocryphal story or not, but there's a lovely story about Einstein. And there's a student comes for an oral examination and Einstein says to him, where does electricity come from? And the student goes, uh, oh, Mr. Einstein, yesterday I knew, but today I just can't remember today. It's on the tip of my tongue. And Einstein says, what a pity. Yesterday there was one person on the planet who knew where electricity came from, and now there's nobody. Which is meant to be a true story. But the feature is that electricity that we use, no one makes it. What they do is they spin a turbine and they suck it in. So it's actually a universal property. And then it's the frequency of it is lowered in a way that we can use it in our machinery. That's why if we put our fingers in the socket and we give ourselves a surge of that kind of electricity, it's painful and it's not it's not beneficial for us. I tried that experiment when I was 3.
Oh, okay, and hence your career path, I guess, eh?
That's not good. That's not good. Yeah. But that's still electricity, but in a low form. So if we put that kind of electricity through our system, it's damaging to our system.
Mhm.
But when we connect ourselves to high level universal natural energies, it actually can activate systems in us that otherwise don't activate. This to me is the meaning of halos around the heads of the saints, the
Okay,
yellow circle. What it's indicating to me is they're running on a high level of cosmic energy. They are what used to be called avatars, which is someone who's living on the planet, but running on solar power, solar energy. So therefore they produce a big yellow sun around their head. They showed it in Egypt as a yellow solar disk. And
Mm.
I actually made a slideshow showing in many, many different world religions how they show the same patterns around the head and in the aura when there's a high spiritual presence. And when there is a high spiritual presence, that it facilitates healing. That's why we get stories of miraculous healings, because if someone's got that high spiritual power and
right.
somebody else draws some of that energy from them, it then comes through their system and it offers a healing to their electroimmune system. So this
So where's
energy.
the connection then? This is confusing to me too, trying to talk to people about this. There's
Yeah,
obviously a connection between spirituality and energy,
absolutely.
but can you be resonating at a healthy energy frequency without spirituality, or is spirituality in the context you're talking of different than a belief in something?
Spirituality to me is the actual presence of a very high power, which is spiritual in its nature, and it causes that halo around the head, and it causes a very great potency in the energy field. We
So
each
above energy, a
it's one of the
greater source.
it's a higher form of energy. Just like you could say, energy is there's energy locked into this. This is a Chinese medicine ball. So there's a massive amount of energy locked in here. Again, if we took its atomic content, it would power a city, but it doesn't have a spiritual. It doesn't have a spiritual being. It's part of planetary energy. So I think of energy as gradations. You've got, in a way, moon energy, planet energy, solar energy, star energy. It's where we get sayings like reach for the stars, thank your lucky stars. The higher you go, the more spiritualized the energy becomes. And the way I think about human beings is each of us have a soul. And to me, there's a difference between soul and spirit. Soul is the planetary energy that we need to live on planet Earth, planetary life. It powers our kidneys, our heart, our lungs, our liver. It powers our system. Our spirit is like a drop of higher power, higher stuff. And each of us has some of that, but our system is set up in such a way that if we're living at a low level vibration, the spirit stays locked into the area of the sacrum in the base of the spine. In other words, we can't live a spiritualized life if we're living in a low vibration. So if someone is engaged in like real in criminal activity, their spirit stays in, you could say, like the genie in the bottle. It doesn't come out. So it's only when we live our lives in a way that occupies the higher wave bands that the spirit is then released, and it rushes out through the whole person. And that all of us have a spirit, but it may or may not be participant in our daily life. It depends what we're doing. This is where issues like morality, ethics, principles, they're not abstract or academic issues to me. They're determining whether or not a person can reach a spiritualized state. Also important is the other 4 fuels.
Mhm.
So the what we eat, what we drink, how we breathe, the sunlight we bring into ourselves, this is all foundational to the level of our vibration that allows or doesn't allow our spirit to engage in our life. And very important, is how we think. So if someone is always thinking about, well, how can I gain advantage? How can I win from this situation? Basically, if someone's being very highly selfish or narcissistic, they they block the flow of that spiritual energy. This was the premise of the book I wrote called Go with the Glow, which is to do with certain psychological syndromes that block the higher energies from flowing through us. So if we're too fragmented, if we're overwhelmed, if we've got too much, if we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, and you can see this in a person's posture often because their shoulders fold down and they kind of look at their feet. So if they're carrying too much external energy inside their own field and it's weighing them down, it's going to block the natural flow of their energies. So what we try and do to go with the glow is to break up the lower psychological energies and to allow the higher energies to flow through. It's a good example, a good mirror example is with nutrition. It's like if someone goes on, I think it's called the Gersten therapy, where it's to do with
Yeah.
taking in a lot of concentrated planetary juice.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah, what that's doing is bringing in, instead of eating so-called regular processed foods and everything
The
else.
high juicing cleanse you're talking about. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, what is that really? Is bringing in concentrated planetary energy in a more pure form. It hasn't been processed. It hasn't. It's not so polluted. It's designed to bring in a gush, a rush of planetary power. Well, according to how we think, we can connect to bring in higher energies. We can lift ourselves into a higher energy frequency when we can raise the level of our psychology. So that to me is the fifth power. That's the one that's based in understanding the energy worlds. And inside those energy worlds, just like the rainbow, there are really 7 levels, and the lowest and the slowest is level 7. And that every energy has to go somewhere. Again, scientific principle: energies can't be created or destroyed, they say. So where does the energy of a murder go? Well, it goes into the energy world of the planet, and it's not a high level energy. Goes to the lowest level, and that lowest level gradually has been filled up with toxic energies. So if a person lives down there, they literally become, you could say, a low life, which is not a nice term, but it's the idea that someone is living at a low level frequency. And so they're bringing in energies that live at that frequency. So when you get greed, abusive behavior, cruelty, bullying, violence, even genocide, these energies, there's energies that power everything on the planet. So it's not just there's nice high energies, which we all like to be in. When we see the news, every item on the news is powered by energy. That energy is powering a psychology in somebody, and then they're committing actions based on that energy. So the idea, the purpose of my work, I like to frame it to myself, is to raise the level of vibration of the people I work with. And so that is to do with leaving certain lower psychological formations, I call them, behind. Because when we have a psychological formation, it calls out to energy that are at that level. That's the law of attraction, so called. So if someone thinks fear, they keep bringing in more fear. If someone thinks confidence, they start bringing in confidence. And we're the only life form on the planet that can change how we think. And
I
we
don't know
can
if that's a positive or negative sometimes, right?
True. It depends which way it's used, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's the thing with consciousness. Consciousness can evolve and it can devolve. It can take us higher, it can take us lower, depending on how it's used. It's probably the most dangerous attribute. Like elephants, alligators, sharks, nothing else can do the damage that a human can do.
Right.
And I look at psychology as more varied than zoology. Because we all have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. we tend to think we have the same kind of psychology.
Mhm.
But I like to look at people and think it's as different as looking at a shark, then a koala bear, then an elephant, then a spider. We think in very different ways. We're formed in different ways. So to assume that someone is like us because they look like us, that's an assumption which can land us in all kinds of trouble.
We have critical thinking. We're not just operating on instinct. So if you're trying to improve your health, is this where
Yeah.
you're starting from?
Uh,
The
I'm
thought
starting with
process?
I'm starting with all five, but it takes a decision, which is mental and thought process, to change our diet. Like it
Okay.
doesn't happen by, we need to go into our control chamber. I think of this as the Central Intelligence Agency.
Mhm.
We go into our Central Intelligence Agency and we decide, hey, some things need to be improved. I need to improve my health and energy levels. You go, okay, where can we start? Well, one access point is what we bring into ourselves, what we take in through our physical foods. Okay, let's start adjusting. Maybe I don't need to be eating, I don't need to go to Tim Hortons 4 times a day, maybe just once a day, or whatever the case is, right? So that would be the physical, starting to tweak that. And then saying, oh, I'm drinking that diet soda in aluminium cans, and I'm having about 5 of those a day. Well, I could eliminate those and have some green tea or water. I'm putting sugar into everything. I can eliminate that. Breathing. I'm not really breathing consciously. I could be more nose breathing than mouth breathing, like in the breath book. That's going to make a major difference.
Mhm.
So that would be another one. And then if I take myself to the sunlight, that's going to help. This is going to start to bring new energy into our system. And by doing it, we're already changing our mental pattern because
Health
we're
starts
making,
from the head down.
starts from the head down. We're starting to make new mental patterns.
Mhm.
Then we go, well, do I really need to watch Fast and Furious 9? That's really not very good mental food. So we have a mental diet, and there's what we're eating mentally. The music we're listening to, we're eating it. We're bringing that frequency into ourselves. There was a fascinating experiment, The Secret Life of Plants, it was called, back in the 1970s.
Yep.
Yeah. And they played, I think it was Beethoven to one plant, and it twined itself all around the speaker. And they played some really heavy, I think Black Sabbath or something, to the other plant. It was leaning as far away from the speaker as it could get. So that was its own internal, you could say, nervous system. And we also have our own internal planetary based nervous system. And some kinds of energy put it under a lot more stress than others. This is where we get into the sort of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic
Right.
system, which always confuses people because to me the names are the wrong way around.
I agree
You know,
totally.
it's like the sympathetic, the fight and flight system is not sympathetic at all. It's like a parachute, or it's like
Yeah.
para. Yeah. But we have to work with it because it's how it's generally known. But the different energies then affect our nerves, affect our breathing, affect whether or not we have anxiety. So as we can change our thought process, there's that Buddha said it, Marcus Aurelius said it. There's this great saying, you become what you think about.
Mhm.
So when we're thinking about toxic things and bringing in more toxic energies. So I get this with people who, let's say, have an addiction, say an addiction, a serious one, to pornography, as an example. Well, what they're doing is they're bringing in a low level frequency repetitively into their brain, into their emotion, and that is going to affect their electroimmune system. Everything we do, I like to say, you become what you process
Mhm.
rather than you become what you think about. So everything we process ultimately affects our health. So therefore, to take charge of our health, we need to take charge of our brain, our mind, and our emotion, as well as our physical body. So once we've got those three, I call it really, in a way, fit: feelings, instinct, and thinking. Instinct is more to do with the body. To be fit is to have control on our feelings, to be able to listen to our instinct, and to control our thought processes. Not to become a control freak, but to be able to say, well, no, I'm not gonna saturate my mind brain system in some of what the media puts out. Game of Thrones was a good example. Like, there's enough narcissistic behavior in the world going on without needing to watch it appearing in fictional form.
Mhm.
So the more we feed ourselves with people who are manipulating and being toxic deliberately, the more that comes into us, the more it tunes us into those frequencies. It is causative. I know movie makers like to say there's no direct correlation, but common sense says that if you watch something and see something enough times, it starts to create programs in our brain.
I have
And
a
then,
question for you. So people who are having some difficulty making certain changes, well, people on the path of nutrition, can they come at it back door with energy work? Like
yes,
cultivating the mind, cultivating, like working on cultivating energy levels, and then it's much easier to attain the health aspects that they're going at?
yes, that's the way I like to come at it.
Okay.
We were, if we go right back to birth, the moment that we were born, the first thing we were doing was reaching for energy connections. That's why astrology, I wondered for years, why does astrology start at the moment of birth and not at conception? And I realized, well, as long as we're in the womb, we're within the energy field of our mother.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a direct energy connection ourselves. The moment we emerge from our human mother, we emerge into our planetary mother, the great mother. I like to call it a womb with a view. So
You watch movies. Yeah.
yeah, so I do. It's true. So we emerge from the womb, and at that moment we need to make our first connections. That's why the natal chart is taken at the moment of birth. What's the position of the moon, the planet, the sun, the stars, and that creates the chart. Because the first thing we do is we reach out to make energy connection. The second thing we do is to then reach for connection to, and including energy connection, the light that's present in the room, the energies in the atmosphere. The second thing we do, which is what they used to look for the sign of life, was breathing. But breathing comes second, not first. So then they'd take the child and slap it on the bum, as they used to do. What a great entrance to a planet. They turn you upside down and smack you. It's like,
Welcome. Yeah.
what planet is this? And only after the air connection do we then go to liquids and start being breastfed or bottle fed. And only much, much later do we go into solid food. So if we want to access and change how we are, to me, the first place, the easiest access point is change the psychology. And psychology is caused by how we think and what energies that connects us to.
And there are many ways of taking in this energy, like you said. So you connect with the sun, you maybe change a thought pattern. That you've given me a whole different avenue to help people who are having challenges with, say, a weight loss area, is to
Yes.
maybe cultivate the proper energies. And then the
Yes.
weight loss will come at them in a different way.
Yes. It
Very
can be as
interesting.
simple as you're feeling really hungry, put on a piece of music. It might sound
Interesting.
completely, like, what's that got to do with it? But the music starts to activate a different part of the mind-brain system. And different musics contain different colored energy. So if you put on like an Irish jig, you're getting some green energy. If you put on some violin music, you're getting more of a yellow energy. If you put on martial marching music, that's more of a red energy. So different musics bring different energy states. But yeah, you can access, or like you're feeling really hungry, try sitting outside for 5 minutes. Substitution is always the better way.
Mm-hmm.
Superimposing something else, and
But even taking in energy, leveling up your own energy can power you into more purposeful thoughts that will stick, and habits.
yes, and that's where coaches come in. I call this the charge to change, because why does someone who's on a weight loss program need to come and talk to somebody else who's already succeeding or succeeded? If they've got all the information in a book, why do they need to go to a person? Well, the person who's already accomplished it has the energy of having accomplished it. So when they talk to the person who wants to accomplish it, that person can pick up the energy of success.
Mhm.
That's
Well,
why,
you're opening up the doors to so many things I want to talk. Just going down that path, talking about how bedside manner with certain doctors and things like that. That's a huge. I mean, people who have experienced that.
yeah,
A bad bedside manner can change the whole mindset of your recovery.
yes. And the difference between a doctor and a healer is very interesting to me. Like a
Hmm.
doctor may be medically trained, but they're not necessarily connected to healing energy. Healing energy comes from, well, the way the system I use comes from what's called level 4 energy, which is a potent planetary connection. And there's a healing energy that comes from that. But if someone is focused on their degree from university and the finance for that degree, and then the finance they're earning from it, and it's a business, they tend to be in what I call level 6 energy, which is a lower vibration. Now, thankfully, you also get healers who are doctors, so
Hmm.
they blend both. It isn't either or. But the thing with someone who has a healing presence is they sit with you, and some of that transfers. There's a marvelous story from Montreal, a chap called Brother Andre, and
Hmm.
actually they've got the largest basilica in the world in Montreal dedicated to his work. And he wanted to join. It's a brief story. I'll tell it. I'll shorten as much as I can. But Brother Andre came from Eastern Europe, and he wanted to join the Catholic seminary,
Hmm.
and they wouldn't let him in. They said he wasn't qualified. So he said, could he get a job somehow doing something? So they made him the gatekeeper. And what he did was every morning for years, he went to a certain spot on the mountain, Montreal, and he buried a token of St. Joseph. And every day he went there and he prayed. Now, he did it with a full on devotional life, day after day after day after day. And then what happened is he started then visiting the sick people. It was just, he was a sort of a helper. And then the monks and the priests started to get a bit upset, because what happened, people were coming to the gate saying, we're not feeling well. They said, oh, we'll come and see this, come and see the priest. They said, no, we want to see Brother Andre. My sister got better when he sat by her bed. And this went on. And when you go to the Basilica in Montreal, there's a wall covered in wooden crutches.
Oh.
Those were people who came on crutches and walked away because Brother Andre had a healing presence that transferred to them. And his funeral was still, I think, the biggest ever in Canada in about 1918. Hundreds of thousands of people turned up for Brother Andre's funeral. It's an amazing story. And he always said, it wasn't me, it's not me, it's St. Joseph. He was very non-egotistical. And one thing I've learned about healing, if someone says, I'm a healer, then you can pretty much guarantee that it's not going to flow through them,
Hmm.
because it won't flow through ego identity. The person has to put themselves in service to the healing process. Doesn't mean they can't charge money for the fact of their time, but you can't pay for healing energy, because
Hmm.
it's a creation property.
I read somebody
Yeah.
posted recently, a healer holds space for you to heal.
And passes the, if they have that connection, they're a conduit for the energy to
Right.
pass through them to the person.
Yep.
So they're both holding space and supplying power.
That's fascinating. What can we do? I want to open up if people have questions. I don't want to keep you too long. But before we get into that, what are the initial steps we can take walking away from our talk today to try and cultivate more energy, positive energy? Positive, is that the right word? Positive energy, higher frequency?
Yeah, positive energy is a good word. Higher frequency energy. I like raise the level of your vibration.
Okay.
I think starting with the 4 basics, like I said, the decision to pay attention to the earth, the physical food, the liquid food, the breathing, getting that James Nestor book. I do recommend it also very
Oh,
much.
it's so good.
Yeah. And then also exposing oneself to light. This was actually an early teaching of Jesus in the Essene Gospel of Peace of Jesus the Christ, where he talks about the need for people to get out of their tents and breathe fresh air, put themselves in the sunlight, and meet the angels, he calls them, of earth, water, air, and fire. So paying attention to those four, that would be the first thing. And then paying attention to how one is thinking and how one is feeling, and being able to self-observe a little bit. Like, oh, I'm feeling a bit angry. Now, is this good for me? Is this something I want? And trying to then move into a place of catching one's own states. And that would be one way. Now, there's a couple of practical things you can do also, like when you're in a space, you can change the energy in a space. I did bring a couple of tools to show. This is one very simple tool. This is a spritzing bottle. I like to use a glass bottle because then it doesn't have any plastic infiltration. And in here, I've got essential oil of frankincense with water. So what I do with this is I spritz, I'll just do it in this direction, can't see it. But what I'm doing is I'm spritzing frankincense into the air. Frankincense has been used for thousands of years as an energy cleaner, an energy clearer. So it actually, both in the form of incense, but also you can use essential oil. So when you, again, by remembering to do that and then doing it, the intention helps clear the energy just as the action does. So intention's a great power. And this I would recommend also. This is a simple bell. And when you take a bell, bells were designed for breaking up lower energy frequency. So you can take a bell, and what that does is it breaks up lower energetic frequency in the area. So I ring a bell over my bed every morning. Why is that? Because at night when I'm sleeping, I'm releasing the unwanted energies left over from yesterday. That's part of what we do at night. Physically, our lymphatic system like washes our brain, so it clears toxins. But energetically, when we have so-called nightmares, they're actually beneficial, because what they're doing is nightmares are clearing away toxic energetic signals that are in our mind-brain system. Our brain doesn't want to retain those, so it flushes them out in the form of images, pictures, dreams. So in the morning, it's good to break up the lower energies that have been released overnight. So these are practical things that one...
Like the bowls, right? They sell those bowls that are at different, each bowl has a different key.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes. So
now I'm going to ask you another question, then I'll leave it open to everybody if you have questions, because I wanted to get into this or talk about this a bit.
Yeah.
We can cultivate our own energy, we can work on our own energy, but we also attract energy from the people we're with and the spaces that we're in with them, correct?
Yes.
And we need to pay attention to those.
Yes. Oops, knocking over my bell there. Yes, that's absolutely right. Well, it's like I said earlier, if you decide, if you've got let's say you've got a clear day, you've got a day off. If someone goes to a casino, they're going to be pulling into themselves quite a lot of toxic energy, because what lives in the casino are the energies of gain and loss, which live at the lower end of the vibration. If the person decides they're going to take, let's say, a walk in a park, or they're going to go into nature, they're going to take their dog for a walk, they're going to bring into themselves a much higher frequency. Over time, this aggregates. That's why I say we gradually become what we process. It's not on a one-day basis, but when you add one day to the next, I think of it like this. This is such a great example. So this is, if we turn this over, you could say this is the energy of the future here, and this is the energy of the past. The only moment we can access, we can't go and change our future. We can't go up into this part. We can't go and change our past. The only moment we can access is the now, which is when each individual little grain of sand is going through here. Now, if we color those grains of sand with more toxic processes, like I said, like the casino, then it's going to have darker residue. We're gradually going to build a residue of a darker property. If we have a spiritualized now, you start to imagine, you start to get little gold flecks, and it starts to become illuminated. And so we start to have an illuminated record. And that's why, to me, that spirituality goes with illumination.
Mhm.
So the more illumination we can build, the literally the brighter we become. And universities originally were not about collecting facts and information. They were about becoming illumined. So the university I went to in Britain, it was Oxford University, but it was Oriel College, a particular college, and the insignia was Dominus Illuminati Meo, which means Master illumine me. It doesn't say educate me or fill me full of facts or prepare me for the working world. It was originally about illumination. So an illumined person, there are just certain things an illumined person won't do. So therefore, certain kinds of more barbaric behavior get left behind.
Got it. I've got more questions if you guys don't have questions, but if anyone has any questions, pop them in and I'll pass them on to Dave. I don't know if you can see them. You can't see them, right, David? But if anyone has questions, certainly plop them in. Toxic relationships as well. Now, do we need to get out of them or can they be fixed?
It all depends. Each case is individual.
Okay.
I work a lot with relationships. I wrote a book about relationships called Partners in Passion. The reason it's called that is the word passion is pass ion. And when you look at the word ion, it says a positively or negatively charged particle.
Mhm.
So when two people have passion, they pass energies backwards and forwards. That was the reason for the name of the book. And if 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 two people decide that they want to lift the level of vibration of their relationship, they totally can do it. If you have, and I deal with this quite regularly, if you've got one individual who actually is narcissistic and all about themselves, and the other person is more empathetic and trying to be generous and fix things, well, one thing I've learned is all the unconditional love in the world will not be enough for a narcissist.
Okay.
Because they'll just say, is that all you got? And they'll just take everything. So at that point, a different set of rules comes in, which is like no contact and cutting them off or reducing contact enormously. But if two people both decide that they want to improve, they totally can do it. So it's going to depend on the contract between the individuals.
Because
But
you can
there's
have two people that love each other and it just doesn't work.
absolutely happens often. You can have two. I get this question a lot. With David, we're twin flames, but we don't seem to be getting on. Right? Like, so what I've learned is in the foundations of a relationship, you have certain things that have been in a way prefixed. So you get the way the person's formed in the womb, you get the hereditary, you get the astrology, you have the house they grew up in, you have the language they speak, the religion they were brought up in. And that provides like one person's got a whole energy set. And then here's a good example. If you get another person who's grown up in a different place, but somehow they both got a similar energetic frequency, that's like aphrodisiac to each other. They kind of go, whoop, and they're into each other. But that's only the beginning. That energy has got a shelf life, lasts about 7 years. That's why it's called the 7-year itch. And beyond that point, it's going to depend upon what they're building together. So what I've learned is being soulmates doesn't guarantee a relationship will work, because after 7 years and even up to the 7 years, what starts to count more is the psychology of the individuals. So I get someone saying, well, I'm a Gemini and he's a Taurus. It should work, shouldn't it? And it's like, well, the astrology works, but the psychology is really going to be what's more important over time. And that's why two people can start off loving each other and then become indifferent. And it's such a great word, because what that word says is moving in different directions. When they're moving in different directions, they become indifferent. And then they separate. So it's work. I wish the fairy stories finished. You know, they instead of they lived happily ever after, it would be, and then the work really started.
I've got a question, David.
Sure.
How do I protect myself as a practitioner from the energies of my clients? Sometimes they also unload their personal problems and frustrations, and I could feel I feel loaded and drained after those sessions.
Great. That means you're being effective. It also means that's what they come for. Like if you weren't receiving, it's always a two-way process. If you're giving high level vibration energy, you're going to be receiving something back, which is of a lower vibration frequency. The skill is being able to process and handle it with minimum interruption. So it's like building a muscle to be able to handle that stuff.
So
Now,
letting it flow through.
flow through and having techniques. One of the best techniques when meeting clients, I always have that bell handy. And in between sessions, I clean and clear the atmosphere, which also clears it in me. So if I'm seeing one person, then another, I'll take a 10-minute gap in between. I'll use my spritzing. I'll use my bell. I'll clear the energy. And that then clears it in me. I'll also, very useful, cold water, wash your face and hands. Because a lot of lower energy actually sticks around the face and on the hands. So that's where you even get this saying, wash your face and hands. So that's something else to do. Now you can use shields or filters, which means you put something in your field as a filter. I don't do that when I'm working with clients because that reduces the effectiveness of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've learned to rely on is the power in my own electroimmune system. Now, in earlier days, when I was less secure in doing that, then I would allow 15 or 20 minutes between sessions, even half an hour, so I could take a little walk. I would give the lower energy to the trees. So if ever you feel really like, oh, I'm just really drained and depleted, and I've got all this stuff, one thing you can do is literally go and sit under a tree and just relax, because the tree will ground that energy, will actually draw that energy and ground it. And you can even project the energy to a tree over distance, and they really don't mind. Also, it's very good when you're working with clients to have a plant in the room. So if you do pick up negative energy, one thing I do is I literally flick it into the plant, because you can flick it away. So you learn to work with these. I used to call it the funny stuff. You learn to work with the different kinds of energy and what they feel like. The lower energy, it feels like something is sticky and gluey. So you get it gluey stuff on your face, on your arms. I always roll up my sleeves when doing energy work because it's very sensitive here to feel energies. So then I'll clear that away. That's why washing face and hands too. So these are all practical things you can do. You can even also have vapor, no, what do they call atomizer, vaporizer? I get the name mixed up in the room.
Diffuser? A diffuser?
That's it. That's it. Diffuser. Thank you, Kathy. And you can have frankincense coming into the space. So you can use practical tools like that as well. But it usually will clear out when you sleep. That's why you might find if you've had an intensive session that you feel like taking a nap. And you'll even find you get dreams that are not your dreams. So don't worry if you get weird dreams after an intense session, because what's happening is your mind is clearing out the energy of the person you dealt with, and will often give you dreams that are more connected to them than are connected to you.
Now, are you replenishing this energy or getting rid of it, or both?
Your body is your mind, body, brain system. Thankfully, the planet has made us so that at night, when this is another important thing. You know how we plug our cell phone into the wall at night and we charge it with that lower energy? Well, when we go to sleep at night, we get naturally recharged. Most of our energy doesn't come from what we eat, doesn't come from sort of Cheerios and tofu and stuff. It comes from sleep. The purpose of sleep is to recharge our energy body. So, and the planet, we plug into the planet's natural energy grid. And so fresh new energy comes surging through our systems. And at the same time, our natural internal ordering is clearing away anything toxic from the day before, making space. Imagine if you had all the worries you've ever had in your life and they still lived with you now.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know, we'd be like, we wouldn't be able to sit up.
It's a constant clearing, replenishing. It's a circle of life in just a different arena. Wonderful.
Exactly.
Does anyone else have any questions? I know we're heading at we're at the 3 o'clock hour. Does anyone have any questions? I want to make sure that I respect everybody's time here. Looks like we're good. This was fascinating, David. You've given me a new way to approach a few people I'm working with.
I'm glad. I'm really glad.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I love doing this work. You know, it's
We'll
like,
have you back.
yeah, I'll be back. I'm going to.
Wonderful.
It's great to speak to you, Kathy. And I love
Great
your
to speak to you too.
I love your line of questions and interaction. It's smashing. Yeah.
Thank you. All
Great.
right, everybody. I'm sorry we ran over a little bit here, but we'll talk to you on our next webinar, and I will send the link out for everybody. Okay?
Thanks, Kathy.
Bye, everybody.
Bye for now. Bye.